Good evening, and welcome to 60 Minutes. I'm Matt Lipman. We live in an age where technology advances more and more every day, especially in the form of new ICTs, information and communication technologies. But it's not just cell phones and computers nowadays that are creating and spreading information. Almost all electronics are beginning to be linked to the cloud to share data that can help societies and economies become more efficient and effective. This is happening all across the United States and the developed world, and the phenomenon is beginning to explode in developing nations. In this segment, we will explore the growth of ICTs in developing nations, the effect their implementation will have on developing economies, and how, once fully put in place, these new technologies will shape the lives of the masses. Across the developing world, ICTs have begun cropping up at astonishing rates. Many Asian nations have seen large increases in sales of computers in recent memory, particularly India, which has seen a major growth in computers being purchased for educational purposes in school. In Uganda, a nation that has had a few 100,000 citizens with cell phones as of 2000, the number of cell phones climbed to nearly 7 million by 2006 and has since surpassed 20 million. Other African nations, Kenya of particular note, have experienced similar increases. Dr. Justin Bryant is an economist from Duke University who specializes in developing economies. Mobile phone usage is exploding in sub-Saharan Africa with a growth rate of 18% per year. So the population of Kenya has 43 million people, and 30 million of them have phones. That's astounding.
But the phone phenomenon in Kenya isn't just about numbers. It's about the way people use phones here.
He's right. Cell phone networks work a bit differently in Africa. They have storefronts dedicated to buying cellular data and electricity to charge your cell phone. So if you want to send more text or use internet or use your phone in general, you have to go and pay for it, almost like buying songs off of iTunes with gift cards. One recent study revealed some interesting statistics. It said that some Kenyans would be willing to sacrifice food and clothing to refill their cell phone coverage. Is that right?
Unfortunately, yes, this is true. What we find is when inflation is running high and disposable income reduces, people spend just as much on cell phones, but will reduce the quantity and quality of the food they eat.
So, although these phones provide opportunities for financial savings and convenience, could this phenomenon contribute to increased poverty and malnutrition?
Well, I'm unaware of any current figures that suggest that, but here's the thing. Widespread mobile proliferation in Africa is a fundamental economic and social change. And while we can foresee many positive potential changes to nations in terms of employment and likely GDP growth, we know that certain negative effects must accompany any change of this magnitude as well. The reality is, while technology carries the potential to improve people's standard of living, it also has the potential to disrupt an existing family dynamic. It can create an incentive for increased theft within a community. Things like this are issues that we should be cognizant of as ICTs hit the developing world.
Dr. Bryant has done a lot of research recently into how nations have implemented technology into the economies of various nations around the globe. In his writings, he discusses the difference between introducing new technology and fully integrating it for the good of the nation.
The idea is not just to promote the use of new technologies, but it is also to transform traditional economies into robust information economies. These kinds of changes take more than simply just throwing devices at citizens. No, this change requires a deliberate effort on behalf of the nation to invest in the infrastructure required to advance their people's lives. So what kind of steps would you like to see these countries take to ensure they're prepared to foster a successful information economy? Well, a country that did an excellent job outlining and implementing steps was the Philippines. As a baseline, they made sure they created high-speed networks with proper security, education initiatives focused on literacy, English, and STEM, appropriate government departments and regulations to oversee and manage the technological sector, and support within the business community. I see these as a few of many necessary indicators of successful information infrastructure. And this is not just economic theory anymore. Some of these ideas are beginning to come to life in developing nations as the early stages of implementation take place across the globe. Jennifer Sumanu, who works with governments of modernizing developing nations, believes that this information revolution was inevitable, even in poorer regions.
Well, developing countries are privy to the global technological trends, contrary to belief and stereotypes. They understand the importance and opportunities of ICTs for their economic, social, and political growth. It's no secret that ICTs can be used to decrease various inequalities that plague the developing world. The obstacles within these countries that you reference actually are the motivation for many micro-enterprises to build creative and sustainable solutions that can eventually result in profitability and growth.
Jesus Martinez Frias, a scholar on the issue, warns optimists of ICT development not to fall victim to the belief that ICTs are magic potions for development or replacements for real-world processes.
And I share this view as well. ICTs in themselves are not the solutions to the problem, but rather a means to finding the solutions. It's all about thinking of ICTs as a transformative tool rather than an answer.
So do you think that the failure of many development projects is fundamentally because of this faulty understanding?
I think this has a large part to do with that, but there are many other factors that tie into the success of ICT projects that we often overlook. For example, culture and community.
Explain this to me.
Well, if we take into account the fact that ICTs are transformative tools, we need to understand what needs to be transformed and what should remain intact. I think more often than not, money in development comes from the West, which is extremely problematic in that Western solutions are not always applicable in all regions of the world. Culture, like many things, is relative, and ICT systems should exist within the context of a culture rather than attempt to override that culture.
Indeed, ICTs would be useful in addressing the issues of developing nations, once cultural values are established to include the new technologies. But one major question still remains for developing nations. Will the price be right?
So, while this sounds great, the first thing that comes to mind is, this is an expensive proposition. How are we going to ask some of the least privileged countries in the world to shoulder such an immense financial burden when they're already struggling to find the means to live day to day?
Not gonna lie, this is an excellent point you raise, and one that I've grappled with myself. Infrastructure of any kind tends to be expensive. Information infrastructure is no different. A few things to think about. Development is a process. So if a nation is committed to adopting an information economy, it can create a long-term plan compatible with its current financial situation to see that this goal is met. Recently, some wealthier countries have taken it upon themselves to fund development projects in certain underdeveloped countries. Just take a look at China. Currently, they have projects running in Jamaica, Australia, Botswana, and a host of other countries. Another method that I propose is for the UN to take the lead in these initiatives and offer a limited amount of funding to nations who create detailed plans for the development of an information economy.
In spite of the cost, there are some clear benefits to assimilating ICTs into developing nations. Information systems will allow these nations to experience newfound accessibility to pertinent data needed to live easier on a daily basis.
In 2003, Uganda created the Health Information Network, UHIN. The system was created so health workers could have access to timely and accurate data in real time, which was desperately needed in many Ugandan communities. So let's say there's a physician in a rural hospital, and he gets a patient with symptoms that he or she has never seen before. If he can access medical journals and contact other health workers, he doesn't have to take chances in treatment. While the system was developed in America, it was Ugandan leaders who took the initiative to implement it and tailor it to the needs of their communities.
So logistically speaking, how is this able to become successful?
In the case of Uganda, UHIN relies mainly on the use of a personal digital assistant, or a PDA. PDAs have become way cheaper as competitors have entered the market in recent years, and they're also extremely user-friendly, which decreases costs related to training. The PDAs have their own internal infrastructure via communication through built-in infrared systems, which allows users to exchange information outside of Uganda's flooded telecommunications system.
So it seems that technological advancements is something that all nations should be seeking. So if I were to create a country in this day and age, naturally I would want to have as much of an edge as possible on the competition. Why would some of these nations be resisting such technological advances?
Well, several nations, usually ones that aim to have tight control of their citizens' information and ideas, often associate changes related to globalization with westernization in general. And if you look at history, you might be able to see where they're coming from. They have reason to be afraid. ICTs are information and communication technologies. When citizens are given information and the ability to communicate that information, governments that don't serve the interests of citizens can crumble in days. We've seen this with the vital use of social media in the Arab Spring revolutions.
So while ICTs are a useful tool in making a successful economy, their potential to enable citizens to threaten existing power structures is making leaders weary?
Absolutely.
When I was picking courses this summer, I was looking for a philosophy course to take away from the math and computer science stuff I was taking for to be comp sci and econ. And I saw this course, and I saw that it was cross-listed with computer science and with public policy, and I'm like, this sounds interesting, but I don't know how they're going to do this. I didn't think that the topics really fit together. It seemed like three really, really different things. But when you come into the course, ISIS 110 did a really good job making you look at the same thing in completely different ways. You take private information. From a computer science standpoint, how do you actually encrypt information that way it can't be read? From a public policy standpoint, at what point can governments not look into private information? From a philosophical standpoint, what is private information? I think this course is really going to help me look at a lot of things in different ways, and I'm really thankful to have taken the class in the first place. Oh, what did I press? Shoot, I hit something. What? That's awkward.
I think this class did an excellent job exploring rarely asked questions about technology that are so vital to our understanding of both the present and the future. As a public policy major, the applications for me were clear. I now understand better how to think about questions of intellectual property. I think one of the best things about this class was how it challenged us to consider the changes that are more or less inevitable, but we may not be thinking about, and how to address them as we go forward. ISIS 110 was great as a gateway course to introduce the fundamental concepts in the study of information, and I look forward to taking more classes in the certificate program.
I've taken a lot of classes in the ICTs certificate program over the course of the years, but I definitely wished I had taken this class a lot earlier, like I was supposed to. The reason is that it offers a great introduction and gateway experience to students who will be taking the courses that I've already taken. Essentially, it offers a great theoretical foundation that can be built upon throughout the entire course of the program. Topics included information technologies, privacy, piracy, digital revolutions, and the implications of technology on science, culture, healthcare, anything you can really name. I'm leaving this course a lot more competent and digitally literate, and I have a great multidisciplinary framework that I'll be able to build upon throughout my academic career and my professional career. I definitely recommend ISIS 110.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Look,
That was terrible.
can
No,